welcome everyone. We're so happy that you're here. Usually we start our meetings with sharing our norms, just so that we can center ourselves and be aware of who we are in the space together. So we do center raise. We center the voices of BIPOC, and we assume positive intent and take responsibility for impact. We also honor our multiple identities. We build community. That's why we're here today. No one knows everything. Everybody knows something. Together, we know a lot. I love this one because it's so powerful. It is really the power of knowledge of the community. That's why we're here, to tap into the power, into the knowledge and the power of parent leaders and advocates. We also do have a confidentiality clause. What's said here stays here, and what's learned here leaves here. And we call each other in and not out. That said, I want to be really clear that we have wonderful parent leaders here and advocates who have agreed to spend their time to inform us, District 28 Action for Equity, and our audience about mayoral control. And this might be for some a divisive topic. So we really ask you to respect that norm. We do not want that anyone is challenging our panelists or even attacking. If this should happen, we will remove you without any warning. We also take this very seriously to grow ourselves. When we have questions, we do a clarity check. We ask questions to clarify and understand, and we use moments of discomfort to inquire deeper. So these are our norms. Stop sharing. And I just want to let you know that my children are with me in the room. They're trying to be quiet, but you may hear some background noise. It's unfortunately unavoidable. So I would like to continue. First ask, are there any questions regarding the community norms? And if there are, you can raise your hand and just ask a question. Okay. And I would like to invite our panelists to introduce yourself to our audience. Just a short intro. Who are you, and what is your relationship to mayoral control? I'm going to put that into the chat. And should I just, you want to unmute and just go? Or should I just call someone up? How do you feel? Okay, so I'm seeing Jonathan here first. So Jonathan, I invite you to first introduce yourself. Who are you, and what is your relationship to mayoral control?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan. I am a member of the CEC in District 30 in Queens. I've been on the CEC since 2019. I'm also a member of the board of the Education Council Consortium, and I'm the chair of the ECC's School Governance Working Group. I mean, you know, being a CEC member, I have been, you know, operating under mayoral control, you know, in a very clear way since I've been on the CEC. And it's become increasingly clear to me that things that frustrate me as a parent, things that frustrate other parents in my community, are almost always related to how the school system is organized and who has the power within that school system. And right now, you know, mayoral control is the way that our school system is organized. So I became very interested in that organization because I saw it as really the root of a lot of the frustrations that parents have. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I just, I'm learning with all of you. So I'm excited to learn from the other panelists and the audience members.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Smitha, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Smitha Melik. She, hers. I'm the New York City campaign coordinator with the Alliance for Quality Education, or AQE. AQE is a community-based organization in New York that focuses on school funding. More specifically, we advocate for fully funded schools and equitably funded schools because we believe that high-quality public education should be a right for all children, regardless of zip code. And so I work on public education issues in New York City. And as Jonathan just mentioned, the mayor controls the schools. So I see the connection in many of the things that I work on in New York City. I'm also born and bred in Queens. I am a product of the K through 12 public school system all the way up to CUNY. So also firsthand had the experience of going through this school system that is controlled by one mayor.
Thank you so much, Smitha. Gino, would you like to go next and introduce yourself?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Shino. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a parent of two children who are actually fully grown. One is 28 and the other just turned 21. They both went through the public school system. I got involved in public schools in general back in 1999, and then met Leonie in 2003-ish. And that's around the time when mayoral control started. And since then, I have found it to be just inherently and fundamentally wrong for one person to make all the decision for 1 million children in our school system. So I have been fighting that for quite a long time, and I'm still at it. And who I am, I still don't know, and I'm trying to figure that out.
Thank you, Shino. Calirius, would you please go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Kalira Salas Ramirez. I'm a public school parent of two, a 4-year-old and a 12-year-old. I feel like I'm going to be in the system forever. That's what I get for having them 8 years apart. My relationship with mayoral control right now is that I'm asking for a divorce. I currently sit as Mark Levine's appointee on the panel, and have been that since February of 2022. Before that, I was president of CEC4. Yeah, this shit sucks. Sorry, oops, can I curse? Yeah, I guess we'll talk about it.
Thank you so much, Calirius. There will be one more panelist. She's right now en route home to log in. And you would not have now found out if I had not skipped the agenda accidentally. We really want to get an introduction and about the history of mayoral control, and Lauren volunteered to share this with you. And Lauren, can you please give us a quick background before we go into the panel discussion?
Yes, I'm going to try to be quick. Also out of fear that I'm going to say something in front of this room of smarties who will hopefully and undoubtedly add and or correct me when I'm done with my presentation. But I just really want to say there are so many incredible people in this space. We have leaders at the state level, at the city level. We have community education council leaders and community organizers and leaders. And I'm really humbled to share space with you. I'm humbled to share space on the steps at Tweed with you all sometimes, and I'm just really grateful to know some of you. And in times of a lot of grief and fear, like we're in right now, this is what keeps me going, to be with people like yourselves. So I just wanted to name that, and thank you. And with that, I will share my screen, which always makes me nervous, but let's go ahead. Okay. Hold on a second. Okay. So I'm going to try to do a brief overview of the history of school governance. Has it always been this way? Yes and no, not really. But mayoral control in some form or another has actually been the norm for most of our history, going all the way back to the 1800s when the Board of Education was first formed. It was very decentralized. There was a Board of Education, but the local, they called them wards back then, they had more of the decision-making power. And then fast forward 60-ish years, when New York City becomes a city with all the boroughs incorporated, control becomes a little bit more centralized. The Board of Education, most of the members are appointed by the mayor. Sounds familiar, maybe. Moving ahead another 60 years, scandal, which we don't have time to get into, moves the state legislature to dissolve the Board of Education, and a whole new board comes into play that's all appointed by the mayor. There is a whole lot of stuff happening in the 1960s in New York City, which I will get into more in depth later. And then we move on to 1970, when we move back again for the next 30 years to a more decentralized form of school governance. And we have 32 school boards at that point, with elected members, not appointed members, who hold power. And this kind of chugs along for the next 30 years. We start to see in about 1996 that this begins to change. People start to talk about corruption and mismanagement of funds, and there's a lot more to say about that. But what starts to happen is reforms are being made. Some major reforms in 1996, the state legislature took away budgetary authority from the school boards, so they could no longer manage their money. And they gave the chancellor the right to hire and fire superintendents at that point. And then we move on to the system that we've had now for the last 21 years. And what we're dealing with now started under Mayor Bloomberg in 2002. Many mayors tried before him but did not succeed. But he managed to convince the state legislature to give him complete, unchecked, autocratic, anti-democratic control of the largest school system in the country. And we're going to hear more about the results of that. So I just wanted to briefly talk about the struggles that were going on in the 1960s in New York City. And like a lot of places across the country, we were grappling with segregation in our schools. And this led to a lot of changes in our school system. And I just want to highlight a couple of historical events that are really important to know about, that I certainly didn't learn about in my New York City, as a New York City public school student. But so this over here, this is a picture of the flyer for Freedom Day, which was I think the largest civil rights demonstration in our country's history. And this was a school boycott. About almost 500,000 students boycotted school on that one day, which was about half of the entire school population. And they were protesting the extreme segregation and inequity in our public schools. And on the right over here, we have a picture of a demonstration a few months later in 1964. This is mostly white parents at the time who were freaked out because they didn't want their kids to have to be bused to schools with Black and Latino children, and they didn't want those students to be coming into their schools. This was a group of parents called Place NYC. I'm sorry, this is called Parents and Taxpayers. Sorry about that. So I'm going to jump forward to 1968, and this flyer here is from a group of parents in 1968. They were mainly Black and Puerto Rican parents, and they put together a list of demands in response, like I said, in reaction to the inequity and the segregation that their kids were forced to deal with in their public schools. You can't see it on the flyer. I'm going to read it for you. They were asking for the right to hire and fire all principals, assistant principals, and teachers. They said those who work hard to teach our children are welcome to stay. Those who won't cooperate must and will go. They were asking for the right to control all our own money in our own bank, that every child in our district gets the same amount of money as children in white neighborhoods, the right to buy our own books and supplies by direct purchase, the right to build and rehabilitate our schools using Black and Puerto Rican companies and workers from our own communities. Amazing. And the picture on the left here is a group of parent and community organizers demonstrating in that same year. That sign that they're holding says self-determination for Black communities, youth against war and fascism. So in response to their demands, the Central Board of Education approved a pilot program. And as part of this new program, community level school boards replaced the more centralized system that they were dealing with at the time. And school districts were given a lot of the powers that they had demanded, actually, to make hiring decisions, policy decisions, budget decisions. And then what wound up happening in reaction to members of the community, given the authority that they were asking for, they fired 19 newly union organized teachers in the Ocean Hill Brownsville district, and that led to a massive teacher strike, 3 strikes actually. I'm not going to get into the whole story. There's an amazing podcast called School Colors that does a really amazing job of telling this story with some folks that were actually there. But what wound up happening after the strikes, the city struck a deal. It was massively disruptive, as you can imagine. Schools were shut down. And in the end, the city struck a deal with the teachers union. The teachers were reinstated, and these communities that were part of this pilot program lost control of their schools, and the entire system was reorganized. Again, please go listen to School Colors if you haven't. It's a really, they do a great job of telling this really important story that may or may not have a lot of parallels to what we're dealing with today. So then we move on from, I'm sorry, this was the only picture of Giuliani I could find. I'm so sorry, but here it is. We move on to the next 30 years of what we call decentralization. That's a picture of John Lindsay on the left, who was the mayor at the time, that this system of moving from more centralized control, so more top down, to more giving community school boards a little bit more power than they had. So this the state law was passed in 1969 that created an independent central board of education that oversaw 32 mostly autonomous community school districts. Community school boards were given the powers of appointment and management in elementary and junior high schools. And the Board of Education then eventually had 7 members. 2 of them were mayoral appointees. So it was actually more democratic than the system that we have now. Each of the 32 school districts had a community school board with 9 members who were elected. And again, this went on to through 2002. Giuliani had actually asked for mayoral control, but was denied. And then this is a timeline of the system that we currently have, that was started under Mayor Bloomberg, who campaigned on this notion that he was going to fix our failing schools, get rid of the corrupt school boards, and everything was going to be great. He was going to lower class sizes. It was going to be fantastic. He was going to run it by a business, because he's a businessman, right? He's going to run it like a business, because that's what we need in our schools. So he convinced the state legislature to give him complete unchecked authority over the school system. He was allowed to appoint a chancellor with no input. He might have even appointed, let's say, an attorney who had 0 education experience. That guy's name was Joel Klein. He became the first chancellor under Bloomberg, and he served for, I think, about 8 years, and then he went on to work for Rupert Murdoch. So that was so he was given 7 years of mayoral control. And just a couple of highlights from that time. There was an incident they called the Monday Night Massacre back in, I think, 2004, when 2 of his appointed panel for educational policy members were removed for not voting the way he wanted to on an issue of school promotion. He wanted to hold back students. They didn't want to, so they lost their positions. About 150 schools were closed. Bloated contracts with corrupt vendors were pushed through to the tune of many millions of dollars. Class sizes actually went up in spite of his promises to lower them. There was a greater emphasis on testing. There was great inflation to support the mayor's claims that mayoral control is an undisputed success, and schools actually became more segregated than they had been. So in 2009, mayoral control lapsed. Well, the state legislature was trying to figure out, is this a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We don't know. It lapsed for a few months. There was no system of governance, which is not great. And then right before the school year started in 2009, they extended mayoral control for an additional 6 years. And that moves us into de Blasio's term. So generally speaking, his time in office was characterized by a lot of fighting with the governor. He wanted permanent mayoral control, but they wound up giving him about a year at a time. He had to go back to the state legislature and beg pretty much annually until 2017. Mayoral control lapsed again. It was extended for an additional 2 years. And I'll skip forward to 2019, when it was extended an additional 3 years. The PEP was expanded from 13 to 15 members. A a parent member was added for the first time, and an additional mayoral appointee. So it still meant that the PEP was essentially acting as a rubber stamp for the mayor, because he got to appoint the majority of the members, right? So then in 2022, the now Mayor Adams wanted an additional 4 years. He wound up only getting 2, and that'll bring us to 6 months from now when this law is set to sunset. A couple of changes were made to the PEP, and still though, the mayor appoints the majority of the members of New York City School Board. And just really quick, I just want to, in case you were wondering, if New York City is the only city that has this kind of system of governance, it's not. And there are 9 other cities I have on this list. And they all have some form of mayoral control, not really like the unchecked power that we have going on in New York City since Bloomberg. If you're wondering what all these cities have in common, all of these cities have school systems that are majority Black and brown students. I think that's important to note, because I don't think that we would see mayoral control in Nassau County, for example, just for example. I put an asterisk on Chicago and Detroit because Chicago just recently passed a law to end mayoral control. That'll be phasing out completely by 2027. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in Chicago. And in Detroit, they were under mayoral control for a lot of the last 20 years, and that ended about 3 years ago. And I'm going to stop sharing, and we are going to pass it over to our panelists.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for giving us such a thorough historical background information. I think it helps us all to really have a better understanding and to move into this discussion. I would love to start with the first question. And that is, how has mayoral control impacted our school communities? And I'm going to put in an order, or should we? Yeah, I think, is it okay if I just put in an order of the panelists and you go? That makes it easier then. Okay, so I would suggest that we're gonna go backwards. We're gonna start with Calderas. Is that okay? Are you ready?
That's great. Yes.
Okay.
So I think I can start with like a personal anecdote. The reason why I became such an active parent leader is because I wanted to get rid of my principal in 2015. And the only way to do that was to get to de Blasio. Like, how weird is that? You have a principal that's not a good fit for a school, that is untenured. You want to engage the superintendent. They shut you down. You can't figure out who to talk to. You go to 850 PEP meetings, and you still got to go talk to the mayor about your principal in a school that has 200 kids. Like, it is the most ridiculous thing. From then, I started attending almost every single PEP meeting, and then started getting involved in my district around school closures, when we had renewal schools or the renewal school program, and again, saw that process was a sham. The schools weren't engaged with enough time to organize. There was no way to provide them with the support that they needed. And so in terms of how it's impacted my community, it's reduced the number of schools that are found in East Harlem. It's reduced what we like to call in East Harlem choice schools, which is schools with different pedagogical practices, and kind of standardized the way that schools engage with students when we have so many diverse learners. It's impacted the funding. Just today, I had 3 different superintendents tell me 50% of my budget was cut in the district offices, and the DOE, if I had an extra 20 cents in a dollar, they took that too. So I can't, it basically has continued to continue the disinvestment, particularly in our Black and Latino neighborhoods, when our kids are already in conditions where they aren't being served holistically and wholeheartedly. And these are just general ed kids, not to mention kids with IEPs, our English language learners, and now our New Yorkers that are suffering it the most.
Thank you so much, Kaliris. Smitha, if you want to answer, how has it impacted you? So, how has Mayoral control impacted our school community? If you would like to answer.
Sure, yeah, 2 minutes, right? Okay, let me just I'm gonna time myself because I've got a few little things. So we're talking about a mayor who has control of the entire system, and so just looking at the decisions some of these mayors have made and the impact of them, mayoral control is why we have a very heavy police force that is occupying our schools. New York City's public school police force is larger than entire police departments in other cities because our children are so dangerous, right? I mean, they must be. So, not really great judge and character there, I'd say. We also have, what are some other decisions that were created under mayoral control? Let's see. When Mayor Bloomberg was the mayor, he closed down a bunch of public schools. He just closed down public schools, and then he opened up a bunch of charter schools. And this man, this man went to Albany and he said, please I want 50 new charter schools in New York City. I want charter schools. I want 50 of them. And Albany actually said no. At first, they're like, that's too much, because if 50 new if 50 new charter schools come into New York City, that means that Albany will have to support with paying for that. They didn't want to do that. So then Bloomberg said, okay, fine, New York City will pay for it. New York City's money for public schools, tax dollars, will now go into charter schools, which are privately managed. So a mayor made that decision. A mayor shut down public schools. He created new charter schools. We currently even have a situation where there are less and less children. I mean, enrollment has sort of been increasing, but they're still trying to close down public schools while still opening up charter schools. And our mayors decide that. But it's not unique to billionaire Republicans like Bloomberg. Let's talk about Eric Adams. Ever since this man got into office, he has cut public schools to the bone. He doesn't just do that in the city's final budget in June. He does that in November. He does that in January. He does that in April. He does it throughout the school year. Schools are being cut throughout the school year because of mayoral control. There's just too many things that are left to the political whim. Bill de Blasio, that man was known for universal pre-K and 3K. Then Eric Adams got into office and said, you know what? It's not going to be universal anymore. I'm going to cut them, because apparently these things are determined on political whims of administrations. It's all just politics. Some things shouldn't be politics. Some things should be determined by a democratically elected group. So movements can be sustained instead of squashed and cut and disappear at the whim of a new office, because it's just politics. And one more thing I'd like to say, while we have more police presence in our schools, the mayor's also frozen funding for restorative justice in schools that's supposed to support students to navigate tension and conflict, which is normal, which is very natural. That money is frozen in the DOE because of the mayor, while he adds more police throughout the years.
Thank you so much, Smitha. Gino, what is your view?
Thanks, Smitha. Tough act to follow. Um, Everything she said, everything Kalera said, but one of the reasons why I got involved in this issue was back when Bloomberg, the famous Monday Night Massacre, as Lauren talked about, right? Against best research that said you should not hold back students based on a set of test scores. That's a one particular metric that doesn't really reflect the student's abilities. And he went ahead anyway, and he fired his pet members. From then on, he treated students as just a set of numbers, right? His approach to school reform was total dehumanization of our children. And that was just all him and Joel Klein, who knew nothing about education, right? He's an antitrust lawyer. What does he know anything about education and children's development? And that's when I realized leaving all these really important decisions in the hands of an egomaniacal person who thinks he's demigod, he knows best for, what everybody needs. And that was just the proof that I needed to know that this is a flawed system. And then it just goes on to cell phone bans, to reorganization of the entire school system 3 times, so nobody knows which way's up, to de Blasio putting on a kinder face, but still dragging his feet on a lot of equity initiatives that the School Diversity Advisory Group recommended, right? Some of the most important recommendations we made, he completely reneged on, and not even reneged on, ignored. Fair student funding. We fought so hard to reform that formula, and he did nothing. All these work that we're doing as volunteer parent leaders and educators and students just don't mean anything when there's only one person who calls all the shots. So yeah, here we are. So many years later, we're still at it, but I'm actually hopeful because I think there are a lot more people who are actually genuinely interested in reforming our school governance system. So I'm hoping we can actually make some changes.
Thank you so much, Gino. And again, I'm sorry, I have my kids in the background finishing up their homework. Jonathan, would you like to close out this question?
Sure. Yeah, to just add on to what everyone else has said, I mean, I really believe that mayoral control is not building strong, healthy schools across the city unless that school happens to have an exceptional leader who goes beyond. But we don't have the kind of, accountability, I'll use that word, which is used over and over again, for schools across the city to make sure they're really doing what we want them to do, which is to, building the citizens of tomorrow. So, just a few more things that this system has really failed on. There's been a pattern of timely and sufficient reaction to emergencies. I mean, we were very slow in reacting when COVID first hit, much slower than other cities. And we all lived through the kinds of the horrible communication from the DOE throughout the worst times of the pandemic. We've seen weather emergencies that have been, completely botched. These are basic government functions that this system has not been able to handle. There's been a lack of policy continuity, which some of my colleagues have kind of alluded to. Mayor de Blasio had a really promising initiative to introduce a city-generated curriculum, the Mosaic curriculum, that was then, it's gone. It's that, it was a great idea that just disappeared because we had an election and we had a new mayor. And school boards don't necessarily, are sometimes don't provide perfect continuity when members, switch over either. But that was supposed to be one of the advantages of mayoral control, and it clearly hasn't been. As a parent leader on a CEC, there has been an utter failure under mayoral control to support parent leadership. And I'll add that, the failure extends to student leadership as well. And I'll say the same thing about student leadership that I said about, the sort of running of schools more generally. Unless you have an administration that really believes and goes out of their way to create, to empower their students, it just doesn't happen. And so I mean, under this administration, it's really horrible. The parent leaders are getting a very little to no guidance or training for what they are supposed to do. And so we have very little power as it is. But if we're not supported in the ways that we need to be, then we can't even use the little power that we have. And I'll go back to what the original point I made is that I don't really think there is accountability for school leadership. SLTs sound like great ideas, where you have school leadership teams, where you have parents, staff, and administration all collaborating on a plan for the school. But in most schools that I've seen, it doesn't actually work. There isn't real collaboration. The principal is basically making a plan, often as dictated by the district or the central Department of Education. So, this is what I've seen over the years that I've been involved. And I think that there is enormous room to create a better system.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you very much. I would like to welcome Tash. Thank you for being here. I also want to acknowledge that please, whenever you're ready, you can just join the discussion. But for now, I know that you're en route home. We're happy to have you here.
Hi, Simone. Hi, guys. Is my background incredibly loud? Because I want to be respectful.
It's not loud. We can hear you. If you would like to introduce yourself now, please do, but we can also wait until you're ready.
It's okay, because I don't want to miss you guys and not get to talk to you at all. My name is Taj. Good evening. I'm the president in CEC 14. I am a member of Parents for Responsible, Equitable, Safe Schools / Lives Matter at School, the Healing Centered Schools Working Group. So many wonderful things that serve all children and support all children in supporting their classmates, which we all know that mayoral control does not do, right? It's a top-down structure with no regard for students, parents, families, teachers, school staff, and not just teachers, right? From the custodian to the kitchen to the librarian, right? They get no say, they have no input, and they have no power. And we know we can develop something better.
Thank you so much. I'm suggesting to go into the next round, and I just want to let you know, panelists, if there is a question that you don't know an answer and you want to have someone else to answer it for you, that's totally fine. The next question is, why has mayoral control persisted? And I suggest to go back to Calderas.
They claim that it's because they want to have one person held accountable. But there's zero accountability when you can do whatever you want all the time. I do recall that when I first got on the panel and I was actively working on COVID mitigation measures, I did have a meeting with Mary Wall, who was the former chief of staff for Chancellor Carranza and is currently now working at the White House. And I was like super excited. Let me take that back. I was super intrigued about starting on the PEP. I don't know if I was super excited. But I asked her, I was like, I really would love for this to be the start of getting rid of mayoral control. And she went into this whole monologue on how the budget for the Department of Education was so large and that it was just easier for them to have one person in charge, and it was just easier for it to all go through City Hall. And I was just like, no, that's not true. But I think that's sort of like what folks in power that are not community driven consider when they're creating these governance structures. I will share that Harvey Epstein recently engaged some folks and is willing to submit a bill to counter mayoral control. He's really concerned that the state will pass a budget without any bill in place. And so I do think that we need to continue to organize as this moves forward.
Thank you, Paliaris. Cash, I see your hand is up. Cash, are you able to unmute yourself, or is it by accident that your hand is up? Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Well, we'll get you later. Okay. As I offered to the panelists, we don't have to follow an order. So if you would like to answer this question, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
I'll go. So why has it persisted? The simplest answer is politics, right? For all the talk of taking politics out of school boards and education and all that BS, it boils down to politics. That's why it has persisted. The more insidious reason in my mind is the opportunity to privatize public good, which is public education. It's a lot easier to sell a privatization initiative to one person than to a board of multiple people. And with Bloomberg came in the era of privatization. I mean, privatization was happening already, right? It really started, it went into high gear with Reagan, but it had been happening. And at the local level, when Michael Bloomberg took control of schools, privatization accelerated in the form of charter schools, in the form of shipping out, outsourcing huge amounts of monies to outside contractors like IBM, who was supposed to come up with this massive database system at a price tag of $80 million back in 2004 or so, to create this ARIS or whatever the acronym was. It was a student database system, right? That your parent can log on to, get all your records together. What a waste of money. That never actually came to fruition. But IBM made off with $80 million. So the insidious reason for mayoral control for persisting for this long is because there are people who are benefiting from one person making all the decisions with a rubber stamp board that approves all these private contracts. And I'll let somebody else chime in.
I just wanted to add, I think, Shino basically said a lot of what I would have said, but I just want to say we need to be really clear-eyed about this, because all of those political actors who were talking about the charter school industry, private companies who have enormous stake in contracts with the DOE, the real estate industry, all of these interests are still around, and they're going to be in Albany too, trying to, exert their influence. So we need to be very, very mindful of the politics here if we're going to get change in our school governance system.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is there anyone else who would like to give an answer to this question? Okay, so what I would like to do is, since we have now 60 participants and not everyone was here at the very beginning, what we always do when we start our meetings is share our community norms. And I just would like to briefly summarize. We are here mainly doing this by parents, for parents on our free time. We have wonderful parent leaders from all over the city here who took time to be here. So I want to ask all of you to remain respectful. These topics can sometimes be heated. Sometimes we disagree. I want you to ask to not challenge any of our panelists and not to attack anybody. If you have questions, feel free to put them into the chat and we will later get to them and you will get an answer from one of the panelists. We also want to stay on topic regarding our mayoral control panel. And yeah, thank you. I would like to move on with the next question. And that is, what are some changes to the current system of school governance that could make it work better for the community it serves? I'm going to plug it into the chat again, and I suggest that we continue like we did and just free flow. Whenever you would like to answer the question, please go ahead. Yes, thank you, Kaliris. This is a confidential space, and I'm going to, while you're speaking, I don't know if it was posted in there, but I can also post our community norms into the chat so everyone knows them. So let me repeat the question. What are some changes to the current system of school governance that could make it work better for the communities it serves?
So I can kick off since I've been starting. First and foremost, let's get rid of some of these mayoral appointees. I think that, we can very easily eliminate mayoral control by him not having the majority of the appointees on the panel. In fact, I would suggest reducing them significantly to no more than 5 in that space. Because it's a rubber stamp. Like it's very difficult to engage in comprehensive, nuanced conversations when you have more than half of your panel that is not deeply invested in public education and is thinking about other things that aren't children, that are currently not parents. I will say some are, and or don't understand the system. The other thing that I would love to see, but I'm not sure we're ready for, is youth voice. We have young people that are part of our panel. They are absolutely 1000% policed in everything that they say. Their voice is absolutely minimized to being cute. And they don't have an opportunity to vote and or even be able to engage fully as panel members. So changing that to have participation of young people, to have them vote, or to even consider, even as regular panelists, younger members that have just come out of the system. These are all things that we can do to transform the people that make the decisions for our children. I know other panelists have other things to say, so I'll stop there.
I would just echo the point around student governance. We should be just like Clear said, meaningful student engagement in the current system that we have before we get to creating an alternative to mayoral control. Currently what we have, there is no meaningful student engagement. If we want students, if we want your kids, if we want New York City students to feel empowered to be change agents in the world after they graduate, we need to give them real opportunity to make real decisions. Education spaces in New York City need to distinguish between students participating in actual decision making versus students just taking up seats to get a seat at the table. There was a fair student funding working group that put together recommendations on how to update the formula for the city. Sheena was on it, and Claris, and there were students also a part of the working group, and the students ended up including in that working group the recommendations at the end, that calling out the DOE, basically being like, we weren't really given much information to begin with on fair student funding. Like it's this whole formula and it's so complicated, and thanks for picking us, but you just put us here and you didn't brief us or really give us any real information on how billions of dollars are used to fund our schools. You just put us here without preparing us and giving us real information. So one of the recommendations was to inform students, to give them all the, all the preparation that they need, and to not tokenize them, essentially, because that is unfortunately what happens. Not only Claris mentioned on the PEP, there are 2 students who sit on the PEP. They are both non-voting. The chancellor also has a student advisory council, which is an advisory council of high school students. It's 35 students across the city who give input to the chancellor about issues that youth care about. They also talk to the DOE. It's advisory. They don't vote. They have no real authority. And so, like Claris said, we can tokenize students, but that's a really bad thing, because then they become adults who tokenize other people, and that's not genuine and real. So I think that we should, even in the current system that we have, we should challenge the system to actually, what does it mean to actually engage youth and actually have them be a part of decision making that is dominated by adults. And also, when we transition into mayoral control or out of mayoral control, and that whole process, we need to make sure that we are engaging students in a meaningful way that doesn't, involve this tokenizing that the DOE does a lot.
I think that what Claris said about reducing the mayoral appointees is absolutely the first thing that we should be pushing for, because anyone who's been to a PEP meeting recently knows that the PEP is completely dysfunctional. We don't really have a functioning school board in this city, and that should change as soon as possible. Beyond that, I want to challenge everybody to really think out of the box. Don't be tied to what your own experience is or what we've had in New York City. Think about ways that we could have a governance system that would really work for your community. And I don't feel qualified myself to lay out what that would look like. I think we need a process that is collaborative to design a new system. It's going to take time, but I think it's really important that that process include parents, students, educators, and scholars to work that out. Broadly, I think that governance needs to be more collaborative and not only include the involvement of teachers, students, parents, and other community members, but also to nurture that involvement. We can't just have a seat at the table. We need to, just like everyone is saying, we need to be brought in. We need to be included and invited into the governance structure. We need robust support for both elected and appointed members of the whatever citywide board we have, and the local boards. We need to really truly empower parents and students in schools, just what we've been talking about, whether that's done by the DOE or in partnership with other organizations. We need leadership that will push for real collaboration on hiring superintendents and principals, and making sure that those leaders are accountable not only for test scores, but for all of the things that schools should be doing to create critical, engaged citizens. I do think that, like I said, creating a functional central board that actually could discuss things and listen and learn about issues and work out what the best answers are is something that should be included in any system, including the one that we have right now. So, you know, immediately that needs to change. But I also think that we can do better holistically with this whole system. And it's not, there aren't easy answers, but the system we have right now is not working well.
I'm going to jump in. I want to reiterate what Jonathan said, because there are a couple questions in the chat as well of, so what are the solutions, right? What are the alternatives? We really, all of us, ought to be contributing to developing the solutions or alternative system, right? I have ideas, but that's just my idea from my very narrow lived experiences. We need to come together as the New York City community and collectively create what the alternative might look like. So I don't have any solutions to propose here. The only thing we are proposing as the Education Council Consortium is to create that process, right? So that we can bring everybody together. We can actually sit down, roll up our sleeves, and develop an alternative system that really uplifts the historically marginalized communities. So that's what I'm hoping for, but that's sort of a long-term thing. Immediately, in addition to reducing the number of mayoral appointees on the PEP and giving students voting powers, there are a couple of things we can do at the local level on the CECs. We should give CECs the authority to approve or reject school closures and co-locations. Those are local issues that should be driven by people on the ground who know best what families need and what their schools need. So that would be a relatively simple amendment in terms of mechanics of amending. Politically, I'm sure it's going to be a big fight, but those are things that I think we can look to doing on the short term.
Thank you so much, Shino, that you picked up a very important question that was posed several times in the chat. And I would love to go back to that later to get more ideas. What I would like to ask, what are ways that we can take some action? What are some actions we can all take to ensure mayoral control ends and a democratic system of government replaces it? How can we help as parents?
Spending your evening in an event like this is huge, right? You all have things to do at home, you have children to tend to, but being here, sharing your time so that you can actually learn more and think about this, that is really a great first step. There will be more events like this. Let's just get to know the system, how it's operating, what the problems are, and start thinking creatively about solutions. And there's a series of public hearings happening, which I'm sure you'll be sharing information about. Do whatever you can to get involved in this issue. Learn about it, connect with other people who are working on this. There's so many different organizations who are actually focused on this right now. Connect with those organizations, attend these events. And when the time comes, we'll be calling on you to contact your state legislators. That's going to be super, super important.
Talk to others. Call your sister and let her know right now, like, this is crazy. We can't keep on doing this. And if you don't believe it, come on December 20th to the next panel for educational policy meeting, where there will be utilization proposals, contracts, conversations, and you'll probably be in shock at the lack of nuance in terms of how those things are decided. Contact any of us on the panel. That I would say I recommend non-mayoral appointees, but sure, go talk to a mayoral appointee and ask them their background is and how they got into this. You'll be surprised at why some of them say they've become part of the panel. But we are at your disposition. If you want to ask us questions in terms of how things are done, if people like typically don't understand, like we have to engage in briefings and a lot of the times we don't get the answers to our questions, and still make a lot of the decisions that are made with people still in the dark.
Thank you, Kaldiris. I would like to take the opportunity to introduce you to Vanessa Sparks. And I think right now is a good time to. Vanessa has extensive experience and she has been on the board before mayoral control. So I think it would be really, really interesting to hear what Vanessa has to say. Vanessa, it's okay to put you on the spot. I don't know what you wanted to ask. I'm going to unmute you. Oh, sorry.
Good evening. Thank you so much. And thank you for putting together this wonderful and much needed discussion. I'm so glad that it's taken place. So just really quickly about myself. My name is Vanessa Sparks. I'm out of D28, born, raised, and continue to reside in D28. I was a student. I was part of a 1971 integration initiative in District 28. My daughter went to school in District 28. I was a parent leader in District 28 in the late 1980s and through the 1990s. I was an elected school board member in 1998. And then I went on to serve on Community Education Council 28. So let me just say from the beginning, I was never for mayoral control. When the idea was floated, when I first heard about it was in the 1990s under the Giuliani administration. And there was massive pushback. And you know me, so you know I'm very honest, not disrespectful, but just very honest. One of the reasons why it did not fly in the 1990s was because we had a lot more white families in this school system. And although many of those families were supporters of Rudolph Giuliani as a mayor, they were not willing to relinquish power of their schools to him. So that was what happened in the 1990s under Giuliani. When what Michael Bloomberg did was Michael Bloomberg played a great anthropologist and just studied the folks in New York City. And what he did, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, was he basically went up to Albany and bought those upstate legislators to give him mayoral control. And it has been a dismal failure. School boards had a lot of problems. There were many, many school boards that were corrupt, that there's no doubt about that. However, there were mechanisms in place even then that were able to shut the school board down, was able to remove individuals. So it wasn't as if there were no checks and balances even then. What I think has been done from Bloomberg up until now is that they've definitely stripped parents and from any real power. They've stripped communities of any real power. Now, some communities, what I will say is a little different now than then, is that under this system, they are an equal opportunity destroyer, meaning at one point there were certain communities that were untouched. But since mayoral control, no community has gone unscathed by the foolishness that's going on under mayoral control. I've always been against it for a very pragmatic reason. You know, it's going to be at the whim at whoever is the mayor at the time. We had Michael Bloomberg, and Michael Bloomberg, it was about the privatization and also the control of this multi-billion-dollar conglomerate and that is what the New York City school system is. People came in and found out they can make a lot of money off the backs of our children and our communities. I'm hoping that if I had it my way, it would be absolute removal of mayoral control, although I don't think that is going to happen. However, I do think there are going to be and should be major modifications made, including giving power back to the local community. No one knows their schools better than the folks that are on the ground. Those of you that sit on CECs now, you know your districts better than anyone. What will work in District 29 is not going to work in District 6. What's important to parents in District 16 on some issues may not be as important in another district. We have, I'll tell you something else that we've seen the absolute breakdown of the C30 and C37 process under mayoral control. You don't select your principals. You don't select your superintendents. That is done by Tweed. They come up with 3 or 4 individuals and feed them to you, and they tell you choose among the 3. But those individuals may not be the best candidates for your school or your district, unlike under school boards where it was actually the schools and the district that selected their principals and their superintendents. Oh, and one other thing, I just want to throw this a little history in. I don't know if any of you know how the position of parent coordinator came about. Does anyone know how that position came about? Parent coordinator. Well, I'm going to tell you. When Michael Bloomberg came in, he wanted to do away with PTAs and parent associations. And so what he did was he hired hundreds of parent coordinators, and they were to serve in lieu of parent associations. And when the state said to him that he could not do that, legally he could not do that, all of these individuals had already been hired. So they didn't fire them. So they left the job descriptions up to individual principals. And for many, many years, there was a lot of unevenness in terms of parent coordinators. You would go into a school and there was no real job description. Some parent coordinators were actually just acted as assistants to the principals. In some schools, they did a lot more hands-on things. But that is just an example of what mayoral control did. Mayoral control was intended to absolutely wipe out parent and community voice. So if this group does nothing else, I hope that it brings this issue to the forefront. And I would like to see, I think I put in the chat, I would like to see, I don't know if this is the final panel, but I would like to see I would love to see Ron Britt, who is the NAACP education chair for the Jamaica branch, who is intensively involved in all school matters, particularly here in Southeast Queens, because I think that all voices need to be heard. And one last thing, and I just want to give this as a kind of I don't want to say a warning, but I just want this panel and you to be mindful of this. You don't want a situation where you are accused of doing the exact same thing as these people these folks that are for mayoral control are doing. And what I mean by that is you have to go into all communities and speak to all of those parents and those families in said communities, because you're going to find some real, even parents that are against mayoral control. It's always good to hear what they're taking, what they would like to see, because you don't want to be accused of sort of going into other communities and telling them what's best for them. So I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Vanessa Sparks. We are so happy to have you here. We are so thankful for you sharing your knowledge. Really, thank you. We appreciate you. I would like to call on Tash. You didn't have much time to speak, and I really would like you to say a few words.
Hi, Simone. Thank you so much. I really am so sorry that I was late, guys. But I'm so grateful to the space. Thank you, D28 Equity for Action, for modeling responsiveness in real time, right? I showed up late, I was having some tech difficulties, and we just rolled with the punches. And that really is the kind of feeling that we want this system to have, right? We want our teachers, we want our students, we want our families to be supported in all the ways that they need, whether that is academic, socio-emotional, cultural, right? We want schools to be places where you can get so many different kinds of enrichment. And when you don't have to beg for it, and where it doesn't depend on where you live or what you look like or what kind of grades you get. And so much of the policy coming down, whether it was this mayor or the last one, it's about splitting kids up. It's about rating kids. It's about comparing children to one another instead of really trying to figure out how do we create the best school system possible so that no child falls through the cracks. And I see so many people on this call doing that work every day. So if anyone can figure out the plan, we don't have to have it tonight. And I think we have to get out of the habit of going after each other more than we go after these leaders. There are people in positions of power whose job it is to fix things that are broken. But we have more energy for one another. We have more energy in a chat with our fellow parents and colleagues than I've ever some of us have for the USC president, for the chancellor, for the mayor, et cetera, et cetera. So I want you guys to show up to the mayoral control hearings over this next month. And I want you to ask your mayor how he's going to fix this system that he thinks works so well. I want you to ask him why mayoral accountability led us to $4 billion in budget cuts. I want you to ask him why he's not leading from the front in a city that is struggling with so much strife and trauma and divestment. And I want you to hold him accountable for being a part of that divestment because he cares more about privatization and criminalization than investment in our children and communities across the board. I want us to be in the practice, right? Like it's a muscle you have to build, but we need to get into the practice of like talking to each other to actually listen to one another. I keep seeing things like posted and reposted and posted and reposted. It's kind of like a gotcha moment. And that's not how we get our kids what they need, right? Like, let's come to the space and really be listening and really be learning from other people's experiences. And let's understand also when some folks do need to be disengaged. If I come to you and we engage and we have a dialogue and I see that there's something very specific that you may want that doesn't actually serve all children, it's okay for me to say that. It's okay for me to say, okay, maybe we can work on this thing, but not this thing. All of us should be thinking about what's best for the most kids, right? That's how we get to a place where we can create a system that looks like we want it to look, no matter what, no matter what your child's needs are, right? And that's what we want. And that's what we know mayoral control does not provide.
Thank you so much, Tash. I'm looking at the time and we have about 5 minutes, but before we are going into asking you for your final thoughts on this topic, I really would like to call quickly on Ron. Ron, could you let me unmute you? Could you please just briefly share with us your thoughts?
Sure. I know we're running up against time, so I'll be quick and I appreciate it. I learned a lot from many of the folks that are on here that have been doing the work long before me. And I thank you all. Really all else, what else can I say? I was just talking to some parents today and, they were saying that, hey, the school system has a large budget. It has a huge workforce. And in their mind, mayoral control at some level seemed logical and desirable, right? This was just an average parent I was talking to. And so, as we went through the conversation and, as I was getting an education from them, I tried to give them an education, and explain to them how, that we got to think deeper than that and how, the focus, where rather than mayoral control should or shouldn't be, we should be looking at the level of it, or even better, the departmental structure that best suits the public school system in the city, right? Because it can be said that mayoral control can be good or bad depending on who's the mayor. But obviously, most of us on this call believe that, we should seek to, fashion a structure to ensure good governance, right? Regardless of who is the mayor, right? That's the point here. There's a lot to be said. There was a lot that was said here tonight, and I appreciate you guys for holding this. I always appreciate you guys when you hold these types of meetings. There's a lot to be said about SCA involvement in here. There's a lot to be said about the suppression of voices, the union voices, student voices, parent voice, right? There's a lot to be said about retaliation in here. I mean, so I mean, and as far as recommendations, there's one that a parent told me not too long ago, which made perfect sense, was that, hey, any candidate for the office of chancellor should be at least, vetted by the city council and and then we should have the opportunity, to participate in that process, right? Because right now we know that's a unilateral decision done by the mayor, right? There's been things floated out about the SEA to be overseen by the comptroller's office, right? There's a need for, freedom of expression, freedom from retaliation, all these different things. So there's a lot here. I'm not going to belabor the point. I agree with much that has been said, if not, a large majority of it. And again, I thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to say hello and bring greetings from the NAACP. We are putting together a position paper on this currently, and that's moving rather quickly into the stages from the New York State NAACP. So I'm working with them, and so we're kind of working through it, to make sure our voices are heard. I know I'm getting all of our local branches throughout the city to certainly make their way to testify at their boroughs hearings, and at a minimum submit some written testimony. So I'll leave it there. And then again, thank you. Thank everybody. Thank all the folks who have been doing this work for many, many, many years, that I've been able to learn from, either close up or at a distance. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Ron. And I would like to invite Jimena to continue.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Ron. Thank you to all of our incredible panelists, and everybody who's come and joined. The chat was very lively tonight. It was full of discussion and back and forth and questions. And while we have run out of time for a Q&A, it's really just obvious that with this subject, with this topic in mind, we're going to have more questions and we're going to have answers, regardless of all of the experts that are here in the space, who are giving us so much wisdom. And so we're going to close out with those questions as we're envisioning what a future without mayoral control will look like. We're going to just sort of rest in those questions as we move forward and start to build on what those answers will look like. And as we close out, we have some announcements. Ari, is that right?
Yeah, just super quick. So as people have been already mentioning, and I'll pop it in the chat one more time, there are upcoming opportunities to voice your opinion. So this is the whole reason we're doing this is that the state legislature is asking for everyone's opinion. So if you are a Bronx resident, or it's easy for you to get to the Bronx, tomorrow night at DeWitt Clinton is a feedback session. They've already closed the opportunity to request to testify, unfortunately. So if you haven't, there are other opportunities. So in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from tonight, the 18th, is the Queens. That one is going to be at Thomas Edison CTE High School. They have not yet opened up the opportunity to sign up to testify. If you are not already on our mailing list, I will also pop into the chat an opportunity for you to sign up for our mailing list, and we will make sure once we see that they have released that opportunity to sign up, we will send that out to our list. I think it was also mentioned Brooklyn is January 11th, and Manhattan is January 18th, and Staten Island is January 29th. So all of those are all at the same link. And again, I'll pop that link in again. And I'll also pop in a link for you to sign up for our mailing list. I just want to make sure, are there any of our panelists, do you have any other things for people to look out for, any other info sessions, anything else that you want to make sure that we have 50 people here to listen. So if you got anything else you want to promote, let us know.
So the Education Council Consortium will be hosting a couple more workshops on this topic. So what I think I'll do is when we have the event flyer, we'll share it with you folks, like Ari, Simone, Jimena, and Lauren, and you can distribute it to your folks. That would be awesome.
I just want to, Lupe has something to share. Lupe is an amazing parent advocate and leader. Please go ahead, Lupe.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me now? Just needed permission to unmute. I apologize. I just wanted to answer some of, there was like a question that kept being asked by several people asking what it is that the alternative would be that we're asking. And so I just want to uplift that what we can do in these next 5 hearings starting tomorrow is we can ask for the commission or a task force to give us the time that we need to create the alternate democratic system that would replace mayoral control. So everyone, I see a lot of people saying, if we don't have that alternative, how are we going to ask to end mayoral control? I just want to center that there are things that we can ask for at these hearings. And the simple ask is reducing our mayoral appointees on the PEP. And that can be done as early as the next term in June. I know there have been many student orgs and voices that would love to have their student votes actually be counted on the panel for education policy, as well as CECs, but I just want to throw that out there. But the biggest ask, I don't want anyone in this space to feel deterred that they cannot ask to end mayoral control just simply because you yourself don't have the answer in what is going to replace that. We, as well as the state legislators, know that that is going to take time. When mayoral control was implemented, it took a commission and a task force and a few months and years of organizing and engagement with the public and those that are true stakeholders to be able to create that system. So I just want to I saw that being said in the chat throughout and it wasn't acknowledged. So I apologize for interrupting this great panel because you guys did an amazing job sharing the history. But I wanted to acknowledge those that were simply here that may not have heard that. And I don't want them to walk away from this great engagement, not knowing what that call to action could be for them. So just know there are steps we can make. And I think really to focus your hearing statements and testimony on your experience and why mayoral control is not working. And also know that all of the registrations close 48 hours prior to the hearing and or when all the slots fill up.
Thank you so much, Lupe. You said it way better than I could, so I'm glad that you were able to speak and bring that to us. Thank you again. We really appreciate everyone taking their time this evening. We know that everyone is super busy. Thank you to our panelists, our amazing, super active panelists, and so many of you who showed up tonight. We know that you are also super busy. A lot of CEC members, we've got other PEP members here. So we really, really greatly appreciate you all taking the time, getting yourself informed. And again, like we said, we don't have the answers. We have more questions, so we have answers, but that means that we need to have that opportunity to take the time to figure those things out and not just come up with something and slap it together because there's only a few months before we have to renew it. And with that, we will say good night. Thank you so much for joining us, and be on the lookout for more events coming up.
Off a little bit early.
Thank you. Love you guys.
Love you back.
Love you. Bye.